Hi, I'm Wes, the Explosion, and I recently finally got around to playing Gravity Circuit. I heard that it took some inspiration from Mega Man, and boy, they were not kidding. On top of being a fantastic game, I got a little extra hit of joy every time I came across something that looked or felt familiar. So as something a little different today, I'm gonna go over the top 10 things that got the biggest reactions from me. Starting with the more tepid ones before building up to the real standouts. The top 3 really got me. Something to keep in mind is that while I won't be talking about any plot points, I still will be mentioning stuff from all across the game, so if you're worried about spoilers, like, say, what the final boss looks like, maybe skip this one for now and come back once you've already cleared it. Heck, why not just pause the video, go and immediately buy and play the game, then watch this and see if you manage to catch the same things I did. Now to get started. Oh, and I promise I'm not just doing this to get people interested in my eventual review by hooking them with the Mega Man angle. One of the earliest things you're sure to notice is that after an intro stage, you get a set of 8 stages and robots to fight through in any order you so desire. And something I should probably reiterate, just in case the intro didn't make it clear, these are all things that remind me of Mega Man, not actually ideas that the series owns, that no one else would have ever been able to come up with without Mega Man there to take inspiration from. Still, Mega Man X was probably the first game I ever played where the order you had to do things in wasn't linear. The game's not requiring you to complete a series of increasingly difficult levels, but instead, letting you take things at your own pace, trying some stages, coming up with the best order to build up your resources, and figuring out what works for you. And when they give you exactly 8, not 6, not 12, not any other oddball number, I just can't help but see it as a sort of homage to the series that cemented the format. I'm not going to go over all the stage elements and hazards that remind me of Mega Man. There's just so many that use gimmicks remixed from those games and others that it would take way too long to go through. Did almost mention these fans though, since the sprite work really reminded me of the ones in Windman stage. I will though mention some of the enemies you face. Most of them are humanoid robots done in the game's art style, but the ones that aren't are pretty easy to draw comparisons to. From the spiked wheels with faces, similar to the ones X has to contend with, the floor-based enemies that move back and forth, going a bit faster when you're on their level. The bats that remind me of the ones from, again, X that hang upside down until you get close. And these oddly shaped turret enemies that make me think of the Screws in Fireman stage. And am I alone, seeing these chunky boys that gradually hop your way and immediately saying, ah, that's this game's Big Eye. Might be reaching for a few of these, which is why it's so low on the list, but when you're in a certain mindset, it's hard not to make a connection. The basic mechanics don't feel too dissimilar either, though it is kind of a mashup of a lot of platforming tropes. Of course you can jump, and there's a dedicated run button like in Mario. Spikes and pits are deadly. Basic combat involves punching rather than shooting, and you get a foot dive move to pogo off of things like in Zelda 2, Shovel Knight, or if I really want to stretch things, Zero's triple and recoil rods. And speaking of, nah, that one will get its own bullet point much later. There's 2 big standouts though. You can slide, which used to be a very Mega Man thing, but it's become a bit more general these days. You can also kick off walls, which you can use in some sections to do the Mario Metroid back and forth, or instead, kick yourself up the same wall. In fact, while there are several points where the game seems to want you to do the former, even then, it's oftentimes more effective to simply just make like X and stick to the same surface. Going along with that, you can also hug a wall to slide down it, or in some cases, even stick to it. While I'm probably forgetting some examples, these wall maneuvers do feel a bit more exclusive to 21XX. The time X takes place in, but also the roguelite that it inspired. Scattered throughout the levels are robots, caught in the conflict that you're able to rescue, and doing so nets your rewards, kinda like in X5 and definitely like X6. They come in a variety of shapes and sizes, including a few canine robots, which really reminds me of that game, since the only rescues you could find outside of the humanoid ones were wolves. As for what finding them gets you, unlike in X6 where each had a set drop, you get a rescue token for each, which you can spend on upgrades. These grant equipable buffs, kinda like the chips in X6 or even the skill trees in X7. Sheesh, X6 and X7, are these really the 2 to take inspiration from? But hey, this is more of a general video game thing that I'm just linking back, so maybe I shouldn't look into it too deeply. Still, nice that you just have 3 slots here, and don't have to grind Dynamo rematches to get the most out of them. While this doesn't happen that often, the times you have to use a final boss's hands as a platform to reach the boss's head in Mega Man really stand out. There's Gamma and X1's Final Sigma, and Gravity Circuits does similar. Still, it's a little different since the hands aren't actually required to land hits. You can either just jump high enough or use the walls to get enough of a vantage point to rain down some pain, which makes it most similar to X5 Sigma. In that fight, you're perfectly capable of taking him down without stepping on his appendages once. Honestly, they can almost be more of a pain than a help, me oftentimes only jumping on them because the alternative is getting hit instead. While you can use the final bosses in Gravity Circuit to land some of your stronger specials, sometimes I'd rather just keep on hammering in aerials. Plus, the way that they're fully formed robot hands but with clawed fingers also makes them look quite similar to X5 Sigma. And hey, on special occasions, we also get ride armor. Well, it's probably not actually called ride armor. Still, this thing's a stout little mech with an open cockpit you can hop in, drills on either side that you can punch with, a separate health value, can ignore damage from spikes, and you get out of it by pressing jump plus up. While I feel like saying that it's just a ride armor kind of cheapens it, I have to say that, mechanically, it works pretty much exactly the same. Well, almost. I can't believe they don't let me take it into this one boss fight. And of course, what game like this would be complete without a boss rush? At the end of the game, you enter this room where after slapping around this crystal turret for a bit, you randomly get sent into a rematch against one of the 8 bosses. I still need to check if this is different for any of the other difficulties, but on normal, each boss in the main stages has 2 health bars, and when you get them halfway down, not only will they start adding something extra to their combos, but they'll also use a powered up special attack, kinda like in 11 when those Robot Masters would break out their double gear, or the overdrive attacks from X8's Mavericks. Still gonna include that with number 4, so consider it a bonus. Anyway, for this boss rush, they start you out on their second health bar so that the sequence isn't too drawn out, but when you win, you get some life back, and if you lose, it saves your progress. Any that you've already defeated stay defeated, and if it feels like they're cutting things too short, don't worry. Between each round, you have to fight the crystal. Holy crap, that's another one! This thing is essentially the weapon archive set of bosses from 10. Right before you fight the boss proper, this thing comes at you with a simplified version of their main attack, and you need to take it out. And while significantly bigger, the general shape of this boss is very similar to the little bits that mimic the Robot Masters. It's 2 tropes in one, and I lost it when I made the connection and realized this wasn't just a simple boss rush. This one surprised the crap out of me, but the main character Kai has a grappling hook type thing. You can latch this tool onto any surface to pull yourself towards it. You can shoot it out in 8 directions. You can use it to hang, or extend it to different lengths, then swing back and forth to propel yourself across gaps. Use it as a weapon to damage enemies from a bit further away than your standard melee. It's just the chain rod, isn't it? How did they know that the chain rod was my favorite game-specific weapon from the Zero series? Love you too, Gravity Circuit. But seriously, the extra functions, like the any surface stick and extra directions, set it apart as Zero's tool rather than a simple grapple power from another game. And if you're still not convinced, just look at it. While I call it a grappling hook, it actually has a pointed end to dig into a wall or ceiling. It looks similar when stretched out, heck, even the coloration's pretty close. I can't look at this thing without thinking chain rod, and you know what? I'm a fan. And at 1, the thing that got me the most actually takes place at the end of the game. You win and Kai watches as the spaceship he beat up sinks into the ground from atop a cliff. And this is probably gonna sound silly to a lot of people, since Mega Man doesn't own the concept of cliffs. There's a lot of media that has the main character looking back at where they came from a high location, thinking back on their journey, and to you I say, objection! Which is just a word, pretty often used in a court setting. No one can copyright it, and yet, I bet you imagined me slamming my hands on my desk and then doing the Phoenix Wright point, and you'd be right. That's because, while anyone's free to shout objection, one series has so intrinsically linked itself with the word that it's become iconic. Likewise, I'd like to argue that Mega Man has done the same thing with this, a few of the X games concluding in this manner, most notably the original X, and also several of the classic titles. Thus, I think this is the perfect way for Gravity Circuit to end off, giving a cheeky little wink to drive home their inspiration, while still keeping it ambiguous enough that no one can raise a fuss. Because like we established, no one can own cliffs. If only Kai would have ran down the highway afterwards, that'd have clinched it. So that was the stuff that stood out the most to me. While there were more, some of them would have felt like I was really grasping at straws, and YouTube loves top 10s anyway, so I decided to cap it there. While there was a good bit of classic and X DNA mixed in, like I was expecting, I was also surprised by how much it felt the most like a Zero game, from the points I mentioned to how it focused largely on close combat. Heck, you could even argue that finding Cyber Elves isn't too different than rescuing Reploids. Luckily, Gravity Circuit doesn't make you kill them to use them. Now, for viewer participation time. Have you played Gravity Circuit, and if so, were there any other Mega examples I should have included? This video was a bit different, so any feedback on whether this sort of thing works, if I was too late to the party, or if I should only ever do Mega Man, pure Mega Man, is appreciated. Can't make any promises on that last one though, since even I need breaks sometimes. That'll do it for this week though, so as always, thanks for watching, and maybe consider subscribing if you're into Mega Man. Also, I lied. I totally did do this to try and build interest for the review.